The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey, greetings from Minneapolis, everybody. Coming to you cordless. I'm Jim Peters. Welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night. It's Tuesday night, August 5th, 2025, and this is show number 261. Mark your bingo cards. We'll have a test someday. I don't know when. So, what I have for dinner tonight, you want to know, don't you? Inquiring minds want to know. Pizza, and it's in my belly right now, and it's making me very sleepy. What the hell? What am I doing? I'm trying to eat early. Okay, so we do this at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central here in Minneapolis, and I'm trying to eat earlier because I'm at the point now, 69 years old, where food makes me very sleepy. It's like I try even not to eat, which is good because I'm fat. And speaking of that, I want to thank Tim Conaway and Marie Sabrin and my mother for joining us for our 2-year anniversary show last Thursday night. That was very cool. My mother turned 101 last Saturday. I said this on Thursday. I took her to the theater. I made a call ahead of time. I know people. It's nice. And when they make the announcements before the show, no photos, all this sort of rot. And the director came out and said, "Oh, we have a special guest in the audience. Nana Peters is here, and it's her 101st birthday," and the crowd went crazy. It's like, and I made a point, partly because mother doesn't walk that well anymore. She does walk though. She's not, like using a wheelchair or anything. I got her an aisle seat, and all night long during intermission and after the show, people were coming up to her and wishing her happy birthday. It was pretty cool. It really was. And the reason I thought of that is because I'm talking about me eating pizza. People say I've got great genes. My mother's 101 now. Her mother lived to be 104 and was healthy until 2 weeks before she passed away. Out of my 4 grandparents, 3 of them lived over the age of 98. So everyone says, "Well, Jimmy, you have great genes." Yeah, but I've got a problem. I'm fat. And I'm contrasting this with my mother. My mother, 101, has never really gained any appreciable weight her entire life. Me, I was rail thin until I got married and I discovered happiness and how to cook. And geez, now, and I don't know, you can't tell looking at the picture here. And people say, "Well, you're not that fat." And yeah, okay, maybe I'm not that fat, but I do wonder if I'm fat enough to offset the good genes. I wonder that. And then do I care? Christ, we're all going to die sooner or later anyway. If God wants me, he can come and take me. That's the way I look at this. Now, tonight, we have a really cool show. I announced this last Thursday night. And this August is going to be kind of a transition period here. First of all, it's August, and this is where everybody in the media takes time off, including me. I'm taking the last week of this month off, and I'm taking off a couple days here and there, including tomorrow. And that's because I screwed the scheduling up. I didn't actually mean to, but it's actually a good thing because I don't know if you've been to our blog at jimanite.com lately. The show blog, it needs a little updating, and I'm going to spend the afternoon doing that. I'm falling behind because I'm fat and lazy. There's that too. I'm also lazy, but I'm not lazy enough tonight to talk to tonight's guest. So what I brought up here is we're going to start now this month as kind of a transition period into September. We're going to start having 2 guests on every show. This is an enormous amount of work. I got to thank Kimberly, who's booking our show. This was kind of her idea, and I agreed to do it because I think it will make the show better. So we're gonna have 2 guests on every show, so the interview won't be quite as long. I mean, usually for one guest, they've been about an hour, maybe a little less. Here we're going to have 2 half-hour interviews, and we're starting tonight. So we have 2 guests this evening. First guest is BRIAN REISINGER, and he wrote a book called, oh, Jim, God, I don't believe it. I don't remember anything. So I'm going to look. How's that sound? He wrote a book called Land Rich and Cash Poor. It's about his family farm in southern Wisconsin, both about working on the farm and being a member of a farm family, and also about the politics involved in farming in the 21st century. And it was now, I thought that, I got a problem because I think all guests are fascinating, and I really do. I'm not like, that's one of the reasons I do this. I'm obsessively curious. And what I asked him is that you'll see is that is the government actually trying to put small farmers out of business? And to my disappointment, he said yes, and I kind of figured that was true based on what I knew too. So there's him. So he's going to be first, and we're going to do a little Jim cast in the middle. And our next guest, our second guest tonight, is Leslie Corbly. She's an attorney from Utah. She's written a couple books. One of them, and this is really fascinating. She wrote a book critical of progressive policies, but it's poetry. No freaking lie. She wrote a book of poetry based on progressive, what she considers the evils of progressivism. That book's already out, and on October 21st, she's having a book coming out called Progressive Prejudice. More of her critique of progressive politics. As you might imagine, she's a conservative, and I have to tell you, I did not read her poetry book. I didn't read it, but we'll talk to her. It takes a lot of balls to write a book of poetry for progressive policy. And you hear this in the interview. She said she got up at a bar meeting at the Utah bar board and read one of the poems, and she said she almost got kicked out of the bar because everyone thinks, oh my God, it's a poet, she's going to have all flowers and sunshine and rainbows and unicorns, and no, she's bashing people who do abortions, and they were quite shocked. I thought that was pretty cool too. So anyway, let's start. We're gonna put BRIAN REISINGER on right now. Okay, here we go. Joining us from his home in Northern California, author BRIAN REISINGER. He's the author of Land Rich and Cash Poor. And get a little of this, Brian. I have your book here. I'm going to put it on the screen right there. Look at that.
Outstanding.
We're so slick. It's unbelievable. Brian, before we even start, I have to tell you, I did not read your book, but I did read a piece you wrote for Wisconsin Life magazine on the last day of your farm, family farm dairy farming. And I got to be honest, it made me cry. It did. Now, I'm going to preface this. I have a little bit of my personal interest in your story is that I also grew up in a small town in Minnesota in a farming community. We were not farmers, but I also was expected to take over my family business and didn't. So, and so how did that work with your dynamics with your family? How did that work out with you?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me. It's good to be with you, and thank you for starting on that personal note. It's always good to hear people who have stories of and understand family businesses and legacies, and it's a special thing. It's something that I wrestled with for a long time. As I grew up, I loved where I was from. I grew up admiring my dad, and I discovered as I got older that I had more talent for words and writing than I did for cattle and crops. And so I wrestled with that for a long time, and I wanted to do what my dad did, but I wasn't sure I'd succeed at it.
Did your family see it that way too, that you had a talent for what you were doing?
Yeah, my dad, I think, saw it earlier than I did. I did my best to do everything I could to please him, but there was one story we tell in the book where we had hay bales going up a conveyor up into the barn, and my job was to push the hay bales off. It was hot, sweaty work up there. We'd done it for generations, and I was up there to push the bales off the conveyor belt. Well, I had taken a book with me to read in between when we had loads of hay. And all of a sudden we had hay bales getting backed up in the barn, and bales were falling 30 feet above out the barn window. And that's when my dad
Because
told me, yeah,
you
that's
were
when my
you were
dad,
advanced with your book, huh?
yeah, that's right. And that's when my dad told me he knew that I was destined for something else, although that was before I realized it. When I realized that it was a year my dad got sick, and every generation of our family, I'm fourth generation farm family, every generation of our family, there was a time where the eldest son had to step up and do the work of a man. And my dad had a story like that. So my grandpa, mine was my dad got sick and he had some internal bleeding, turned out to be an operation that had to involve dealing with some cancerous cells. And so I was doing his work for a few months alongside of a neighbor who came to help. And that was the year I'm grateful and proud to have had the chance to work and do that and help move the farm forward. But that was the year that both I did that work and I realized that I wouldn't farm going forward. And so at the age of 14, I realized that, and it felt like I'd betrayed my dad. And so getting the chance to write about these things and tell our story honestly, come back full circle, yes, be involved at the farm. As my dad works to pass it along to my sister, I'm involved in the business side. I hop in a tractor and help out. But for me to be able to tell our story was such a meaningful thing because of the way I felt so tortured over that for so many years.
Is your father still with us?
He is. I'm grateful to say he's still farming at the age of 73.
And I got the impression from your piece in Wisconsin Life that basically your sister became the farmer, right?
Yeah, that's right. My sister's been working to take it over. She had a love for animals that started from when she was little on, and it's grown into her working with my dad. I worked on the farm till I was 18, got my first newspaper job, and my sister started working on the farm when she was in early high school and started working with him all the way through and has continued to do that. She's had to hold different jobs at different times because one of the other things we talk about in the book is how the middle class kind of slipped away for a lot of farmers. She makes a good living, but she does it both farming with my dad and she does hair, works in cosmetology. At different points, she's been a mail carrier, bartender, all kinds of things alongside of the supplemental income that comes from a farm. And that size of farm was at one time enough for my mom and dad to have a middle class living and be able to help both of us pay for education after school.
So what do you think's going on here? Is the American government, are we actually trying to force small farmers out of business? Is that what's going on?
As shocking of a notion as that is, I do think that's what's happened at different points throughout our history. There have been times where literally the government stated policy, whether it's the establishment or the Republican Party or whether it's the Democrats, has been to push farms to get bigger or get out. And there have been all kinds of times throughout our history that did that. One that we really zero in on in the book is during the farm crisis that developed in the late 70s, early 80s. My mom and dad, we tell the story in the book of them surviving a drought the year that they were married. And my mom did still marry my dad. I want to give that spoiler alert. But the reality is that they were facing a drought. The way they got through it was through hard work and banding together with neighbors. If they hadn't done that, they would have had to take out a whole lot of extra debt to get through those years where they couldn't grow the feed they needed for their animals. If they'd gone into the 1980s with that kind of debt, they'd have been wiped out. We had tens of thousands of farms that were wiped out by all kinds of government policies that caused the farm crisis of the 80s, and it's just one of many examples.
Well, how many people are just getting out just because it becomes too damn hard? I don't mean physically hard. I mean even just fighting the system.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have lost 45,000 farms on average for the past century. And most of those have either been, if not bankruptcies and farms going under, farms selling because of basically sales of no choice, which is to say, you can keep going and try to make a living and eventually you're going to be broke, or you can sell now. And there are so many families that are forced into that. And it's three big things. One is government policy, and we can get into more examples of that. The other is economic crises that we don't understand how they affect our farms from the Great Depression to COVID and beyond. And third is technology that has moved American agriculture forward, but has also needlessly left so many family farmers behind. So it's those three factors that just hit farms every decade, every year, and make it harder and harder to make a living.
My wife has a cousin who farms in Iowa, and he's an actual he farms corn and soybean. He's not in cattle, but he has 400 acres, and amazingly now he can run the entire farm with him and one other person. I mean, the technology is amazing. He talks about these giant 24 row combines, and they're run by GPS. And you don't. He says, I do the field once, and then I get in with a book. Like, you'd probably love this. Yeah, and the combine drives itself. It's
Yeah.
like amazing. So he's making it work, but I'm just another personal story. My accountant, who runs a small firm, she has a handful of employees, but she says that she thinks the government's trying to force small accountants out of business because they change the regulations so quickly that basically no one person can keep up. And so my question is, what do you think of the? I mean, I don't. Is the corporatization of America a good idea?
It's a great question. And I think that the failures of our government fit in with the corporatization. In the farm crisis, the
Oh,
failure
I'm
was,
sorry, I didn't hear that. What did you say?
yeah, the corporatization fits in with the ways that our government is failing us. So the government during the farm crisis, what they did was they pushed more debt on farmers, government fueled debt on farmers, and then shortly after that, they increased interest rates to control inflation. You can argue for or against either of those choices, but when you make those choices one after the other, what you do is you push debt on farmers and you make it more expensive. That's happening at the same time that our government has really leaned into bigger being better in every single element of our American economy. And so people talk about the big farms, but I always say, well, it's not really about the big farms themselves. What it's about is all across the American economy, we have industries that are largely dominated by a few large players. When you do that, the food industry has to keep up with the rest of the American economy. The agribusiness companies have to keep up with the food industry. The farmers have to keep up with the agribusiness and the food companies. So everybody's keeping up with the Joneses here. And farmers, whether they're big, small, or in between, are all facing that pressure to get bigger and get out. And some of them get bigger and some of them get out. And then others are struggling along trying to find a third way. And that's really the kinds of family farms that we're talking about in the book.
Brian, how many acres or how many head of cattle do you need to be no longer be a small farm? Like what are the numbers?
That is such a good question. So in the 80s, when my dad was first paying off the farm to my grandpa, the average size midpoint of a dairy herd, just to use one example, was 80 cows. And we had 50 cows. So we were on the small side of medium at that time.
Uh-huh.
That 80 number is now 1,200. That's the
Oh,
midpoint.
Jesus
of dairy
Christ.
herd. Yeah. Yeah. And so farms that were at one time medium are now minute. And so that's the kind of scale that farmers are fighting against, whatever their size. They're all facing that pressure again because of economic crises, because of government policies, and because of the shift in technology that is pushing farms in this direction.
So how are what the current how's the current tariff situation um affecting farms like your families? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. So there is an opportunity to put family farms first in our trade deals and deal with a real dilemma that farmers have been facing. And that is that on the one hand, the wide open trade of the 90s led to a lot of unfair trade practices, things that have led to, even if there are more open markets, unfair practices, lower prices, anti competitive behavior that's affecting American farmers. And then on the other hand, farmers can't have a shut down trade. They do need to have markets abroad to sell their goods in addition to selling food here to Americans. And so what we can do is we can move forward. You can use tariffs and you can use other tough negotiations to drive harder bargains that wipe out unfair trade standards, but do that while working to open up markets. So what we've been seeing with the UK, Japan, EU, Indonesia, if we can keep opening up markets and if we can have the final negotiation around those deals be focused on putting family farms first, we can both make markets more fair for farmers as well as workers, et cetera, and be opening up markets. But if we just let the doors be wide open, we'll have farmers vulnerable to foreign manipulation. And if we shut them down, we're going to have farmers vulnerable to foreign retaliation, which say they make it harder for farmers to sell their goods in other countries.
are the Trump negotiations doing that stuff?
It's a good question. There have been a lot of family farms that have been speaking up, and a lot of farm organizations have been speaking up about the need to see trade deals coming out of these harder lines. And so the Trump administration sort of began the process by drawing a harder line. And the farm position, I think, at that point is okay, if we're drawing that harder line, let's make sure that we're accomplishing deals. And they're starting to see those deals. I think the farming community would like to make sure that the deals are tough and they'd like to see deals continuing. And I think they're seeing hope here that we're seeing kind of a family farm first approach. And we just need to see how the rest of it plays out in terms of the number of deals that are accomplished and how the final negotiations land. I'll give you an example. The UK could be a huge opportunity for family farmers who raise beef if we can make sure that the final deal allows enough types of American beef in their borders. I think that's the goal and that's the hope. But all these things are complicated and very sensitive.
Yeah, but Brian, have you ever been to the UK? They can't cook, you know.
That's true.
They're gonna take that beef and they're gonna burn it. That's what's gonna happen.
That's absolutely right. It's funny you say that though, but it's a funny reason that points to why we need to have as much variance and diversity and freedom in the types of fair trade deals that we're making. So for decades, China has been the biggest trading partner in America. It's always been also been America's biggest adversary. And they buy up a bunch of American agriculture products and then they dump them to press the price down,
Yeah,
in
right.
addition to foreign currency manipulation and other cheating. And so we've got to draw a hard line with those countries to get them in line and hope that we can strike a good deal with China that makes them trade with us more fairly. But the other thing we need to do is move past China. So in 2022, kind of the waning years, the Biden years, and kind of almost closest you could get to in between the administrations, there were only 20 deals as of 2022 with foreign countries. There are hundreds of countries. So let's find other countries that will negotiate fair, have fair markets for farmers, open those up so we're not as dependent on adversaries like China or
Yeah.
countries like the UK that might be, not good cooks or uptight about this standard or that standard.
Yeah, and you said the magic word there, China. So what's the deal? And first of all, you're absolutely right. I mean, they're raking us over the coals on everything for years. What's the deal with them buying up farmland? Like, first of all, do you understand this issue? I don't understand it that well. And secondly, what do you think about it?
Yeah, you are right to ask about it, and it is a complex issue, but I can boil it down to some simple terms. The amount of farmland owned by China is north of 300,000 acres, and the
Oh, I'm
amount,
sorry, say again, what was it?
yeah, yep, north of about 300,000 acres.
300,000,
Yep.
right?
And in general, the amount of land owned by other countries is relatively small. But the real issue, you'll hear people saying it doesn't matter, saying, well, it's a small amount of land. Well, the issue is how fast it's growing. So
Yeah,
we had an increase of 15%, double digit increase in just 2 years of the amount of land owned by foreign countries. And within that, adversaries like China really pushing. And what that's doing is China's very patient. They spent a long time building up their buying of American agriculture products so that we were selling enough to them that when they stopped buying, they could push the price down. They took the time to build that. So
right,
they're having to do this acre by acre.
right,
And in addition, a lot of the farmland that they're buying is near military installations, and
right.
that's not a coincidence. And so this is a real problem to our food security as well as to our national security.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you about that. My impression is it's not so much how much land they bought, but the location of it seems to be really crucial.
Yeah,
Now,
that's right.
your farm is near Baraboo, Wisconsin, is that right?
Yeah, Baraboo is the county seat of Sauk County, which is where I grew up and where our farm still is.
And you're still traveling back and forth there?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I have a little bit of a unique situation. My wife is from Northern California, and my work writing can be done from anywhere. So we moved there, and we live in Sacramento region, which has a lot of great farm country for Wisconsin farm boy who never expect to be in
Yeah,
California. And then I split my time back and forth between there and the family farm in Wisconsin. When I'm in Wisconsin, I live there at the farm with my mom and dad. And I help out on the farm while continuing my work writing and trying to find solutions to these issues.
yeah. And so the reason your piece in Wisconsin Life made me cry is because you were talking about the last day that you guys milked the cows, and and you said that when the cows were being sent off into the trailer to be moved away, that it's like they didn't want to go. And
Yeah.
I'm such a I deal with animals, and I'm sure that's true. I don't know how animals. Do you know who a guy named Rupert Sheldrake is? You ever heard of him?
No.
He's a behavioral scientist in the UK. He wrote a book called, and this is not maybe the exact title, but it's called "How Dogs Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home." And so, everyone has experienced this phenomena about the fact their dogs end up waiting for people by the door. And so he decided he spent an enormous amount of time trying to figure out why this was happening, and he couldn't figure it out. Although he did confirm the fact it's real. And then the other thing you said at the end of the piece is that your dad said you basically had an all-time record day the last day they milked the cows, and
Yeah.
he thought it's because the cows knew what was going on. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm a sentimental fool, but that doesn't surprise me if that was true.
I think you're so right. I think animals and children know more than we give them credit for, and know more a lot of times than the rest of us. I'm 40 years old. I got a little girl who's 1, and she amazes me with the things that she shows me each day. And you have the same thing happen with animals, especially when you work close with them. And
Yeah.
on that last day, as you said, and we talk about this also in the book, Land Rich, Cash Poor, that day, I remember helping load the cows, and there was the clanging of the trailers. And it's, there's a lot of love for these animals, but it's also a hard day. It's hard work, and it's really sad. And we're pushing them out, and the cows, they were coming out the barn, and they just kept on turning back on us
Yeah.
and kept going back to their stanchions. And I do think they knew. And my dad, we talk about this. This isn't in the piece that you read, but it is in the book. He stood there that day, and he did not help load the cows. He stood there and watched because he just couldn't do it. And it's probably the only task on the farm that he has never done.
Yeah.
And when they kept going back, wanting to turn back, it was almost like the cows and my dad were standing in solidarity as we were loading them up, and it
Yeah.
was really heartbreaking.
And speaking of solidarity, so what percentage, and I suppose maybe we have to make a difference between dairy and beef here. What percentage of the total output in America is done by what would be considered classified family farms of the
That's
total food output?
That's a really good question. I don't have the latest numbers on the total food output, but I can give you a
Yeah,
direct
ballpark.
broad answer. So the number of farms we have in this country, we've lost 70% of our farms at the rate of 45,000 a year. The number of farms we have left, amazingly, is 88% small family farms. 88% of them are small family farms. However, most of our food, the majority of our food comes from the largest of those farms.
Yeah.
And here's
Right.
why. The reason for that is the way that these small family farms are holding on is what I mentioned earlier. They're no longer making a full-time income off of the farm. It's supplemental income. So you got
Huh?
families who are working construction jobs, pulling factory shifts, pouring concrete, any number of other jobs, and farming. And so they're making part-time income on the farm, and they're not able to produce as much food as they could if it could be their full-time vocation. And so the biggest farms are the ones that are full-time and that are churning out most of our food. And the reality is that we could feed our country and then some, and sell more abroad and have the food be healthier, more affordable, and more secure if we had more of those family farms able to be growing entrepreneurial ventures again, like they were, in the days when my great grandfather first founded our farm in 1912.
Well, now I'm pulling this statistic out of my butt. I did not do the research on this, but if I'm right, in the last 100 years, we went from 100 years ago, 50% of the American public was involved in farming. Now it's like 4%.
Yeah.
And basically we weren't creating enough food for society till about 70 years ago, roughly. I mean, people take this completely for granted now, but in 1930, most people didn't have enough to eat because literally the world couldn't produce it, you know? So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm making a statement here, not a question. I suppose part of the problem is literally technology has increased to the point where it's become, I know it's not easy doing what you do, but it's become easier. So to produce for less people to produce more food, like my cousin being an example. But on the other hand, too, now you guys are in beef now, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Right.
I don't want to eat bugs. I don't want to eat bugs, Brian. I don't. It's bullshit. It's complete bullshit. We can swear on the show. There's no FCC, so, So no, I'm not going to do that. I like my steak, and I want my cows. Here's my deal. Curious to see what your thoughts are on this. Speaking of animals, I don't mind animals. I don't mind animals being killed for food because we're all going to die sooner or later. I just want them treated well while they're alive. You know what I mean? That's what I think is. And this thing about the Kobe beef, though, that's getting ridiculous. I don't know if cows need to be massaged. I don't know that, but no. My point is, no. I want you guys to produce some beef because I want some beef. I do not want to do. I do not want. I'm not a vegetarian. I'm not going to do it.
Well, one of the things that unites people who are carnivores or omnivores and people who are vegetarians is that they want to have a world where you know where your food comes from. And here's the reality. If it was grown in the ground, and I include in that livestock that are fed on things grown in the ground. If it was grown in the ground, it's probably good for you. If it's grown in a lab, it probably isn't. And that's just a maxim that I think we all need to embrace. And you're absolutely right about that being part of the solution. And the problem is that we just have, although there's a growing number of people who care about where their food comes from, we're all divided over these debates rather than people seeing that what we need to do is put family farms first in this country. And if we were to make that change, we could solve a lot of problems, including making sure you get your beef.
Well, is there some sort of union for family farmers? I mean, if 80% of the farmers are family owned, do they consolidate? How does this? I mean, do they have any sort of political
Yeah.
lobby, or how does it work?
Yeah, absolutely. We need to have a world where family farms are getting more and more engaged in the process. It's all the people doing the work, keeping their head down, doing the work. They need to pick their head up and make sure that they're speaking up. And there are a lot of organizations that represent farms. There is a National Farmers Union. There's a National Farmers Organization. There's a Wisconsin Farm Bureau, or excuse me, the American Farm Bureau Federation, which Wisconsin Farm Bureau is the Wisconsin chapter. That's why I thought of it. And all these organizations represent agriculture, and they all do it with members on the ground informing their policies. But the issue is that just so many farm families aren't necessarily involved in the process. So many farm families aren't involved in speaking up. We need more of them to get involved. And right now, with the Trump administration, some of these agriculture organizations do have some influence. They've been able to influence tariff policy and other things so that when America's drawing a tough line, it doesn't hurt a particular type of industry in a way that would be anti-competitive or unfair, or leaving too open to foreign retaliation. There's been a lot of dialogue. So the best thing we can do is get family farms more and more engaged in those organizations.
What was your impetus to write the book?
The impetus was just growing up with this issue. So when I was a boy, guys are driving the driver. They talked to my dad. This farm went under. This farm sold. I knew from the beginning that I was very, very lucky and blessed to have been part of something. And I didn't know why it was disappearing, but I knew that it was, even as a little kid. And as I got older and I pursued a writing career off the farm, I wanted to have some sort of purpose that could be worthy of my dad's work. And so I decided I want to answer that question. Why is it that our farms are disappearing? And so I began to investigate that issue. I found the hidden areas of history that are driving that disappearance from the Depression on up through today, and what's the impact that's having. And then we wove that with our family story. And that was really the only way to answer the question, to get your arms around these big forces that have been wiping out farms and tie that to the farms on the ground like ours seemed like the only way to answer that question. So that's what drove me. And what I found, and you're touching on this through all your questions, what I found is that the hollowing out of rural America is affecting every single American dinner table, because
Yeah.
as we lose our family farms, our food's getting more expensive, less healthy, less secure.
Right. Did you go to school in Baraboo? Was that the
I
nearest town?
nearby, I went to school in a school district called River Valley, which is a bunch of small towns that are dwarfed by Baraboo, which is itself a pretty modest sized community. So I was from small town outskirts, not far from Baraboo.
Yeah. There's something about growing up in a small town Midwest America. I don't know. It's hard to explain to people who haven't done it, but there's a certain romance to it. Have you spent much time in the South? I've noticed the same thing going down there. There's
Yeah.
something about that place, and it has a feel of its own. And rural Wisconsin and rural Minnesota do too. It's very hard to explain, but
Yeah,
you know,
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I lived for a number of years in Nashville and traveled around Tennessee for some of my work in both journalism and public policy. And so I got the chance to see rural South as well as the rural Midwest. And there's something about small business, local communities, family, that build a lot of work ethic, build a lot of values, and ultimately just are examples a lot of what built this country. Whether it's people who have worked in steel, whether it's people who mine coal, whether it's people who grow our food, whether it's the American cowboy out west, it's people who've had the chance to pursue their own destiny and do it in a way that can help other people and help advance the country, that have really helped build this country. And I really believe that about people like my dad. And I think that as we are losing that, we're not only losing the farms that feed us, but we're losing a part of ourselves a little bit along the way too.
yeah. I have a lot of people on the show talking about this, Brian, and sounds like it's off topic, but it's not. What do you think of this AI thing? Do you think this? I mean, I'm starting to think I'm starting to think that AI is going to take over a lot of people's jobs, but at first it's going to be white collar mental jobs. But eventually, there's already a Chinese company that says they're going to be selling a humanoid robot for $6,500. You
Yeah.
know, they will basically be slaves, and they will be able to do all sorts of stuff. And do you think this is going to destroy American culture, or do you have any thoughts on this?
It's a great question. it seems like something that is just the classic double-edged sword where there's so many opportunities for advancement and also so many opportunities for it to go wrong.
Yeah.
The best thing that I can do is try to tie it back to that farm issue. I talked about how technology has been leaving farms behind. My hope is that we steer the AI era of technology better than we have past eras of technology. In farming, the reason that so much of our technology moved agriculture forward but left family farms behind along the way is because we lost sight of what's called scale neutral technology. That's where you got technology that is the right size where it can work for farms small and medium as well as large, both in terms of being practical for their operation, but also in terms of being affordable. We used to have more of that in the first half of the 20th century, and we began to lose that. And what it did is it wiped out a lot of farms because they couldn't afford or the technology wouldn't fit a farm of their size. So perfectly competitive, agile, adaptable farms just couldn't take on the next round of technology, and they fell behind. With AI, it could go both ways. I'll give you a brief example of each. You can envision a world, right, where we've got large AI implements all being controlled from a bank of kind of NASA style screens, and all you need is one farm employee to run the whole thing for thousands of acres, right? You can
Yeah.
envision the world. You can also envision a world that's actually in development, where we have what they call small modular vehicles that might be used to treat fields or do other types of field work. And if they're small and modular, you can have a small farmer buy one or two, you can have a larger farmer buy 20. And it's just a matter of everybody can scale up and scale down. And it's technology that can fit everyone's farm and be affordable depending on how big you are. We need AI, desperately need AI to go in that latter direction toward technology that can be used on small and medium as well as large farms. If we don't, AI could be the final death knell on technology wiping out our farms. If we make the change, it could be a way to bring family farms forward into the 21st century in a way that gives us a brighter future for food for every American.
Yeah. Do you think at the end of the day, does it come down to a little too much greed? I mean, the thing is, it's like I keep talking about responsible capitalism, It's like truly a capitalist, absolutely. But on the other hand, you just can't you can't do everything for the dollar. I mean, you just can't. People have to, I don't know. Tell
Yeah,
me.
I think you're absolutely right. I think the key is, do we have an ability for entrepreneurship to be able to continue in our industries? And in farming, it has gotten so hard. You're getting pushed toward getting bigger or getting out, that the new entrepreneur opportunity for farms and the ability for a small farm to make it is getting harder and harder. That's not American capitalism, or not the way that it ought to be, and not the way that it was originally. We just need a world where small businesses, the little guys, can have a chance. There's a part of the market that makes sense for them, or they can upset the big guys. I mean, that's the underdog American story. We have to have that ability for things to keep regenerating. And one of the things that I say is that's not only good for the farms that are out there that we want to be able to grow and be part of our system, it's good for, other large established companies. I mean, manufacturers that supply to farmers, large food companies that buy from farmers. Like, if we keep losing farms at the rate of 45,000 a year going forward, like we did for the last century, we'll have lost the rest of our farms in 40 years. I'm 40
Yeah.
now, but my little girl's my age will have lost the rest of our farms. So that's customers for all of these major corporations. So when I'm talking to people in corporate America, that's what I say is, hey, look, at some point, pursuing bigger is better, and that's the only way toward efficiency and productivity, wipes out the customer base for all the rest of these industries. So we need to have a form of capitalism that drives as much money as you can make as sustainably as you can make it. And by sustainable, I'm talking about economic security, the ability for a lot of actors out there. That's
Right.
just a way to make sure that everybody can continue forward, including the biggest of companies.
Not to mention the fact, if the whole world devolves into 12 companies in America making food, well, all the food's going to be the same. It's like,
Well,
that's bullshit.
and it's not good for any one of these companies. I mean, think about like the Great Recession. That's where I cut my teeth in economic journalism. I was covering the Great Recession, the bank failures, and the too big to fail days. I mean, imagine look at what it did when we had banks that were too big to fail to our financial system. Imagine if
Yeah.
that was our food system. And that is a
Right.
world that we
Right.
could face in 40 years if we don't do something.
Yeah, I thought of that. You're absolutely right. If that, it would have been just catastrophic. We have we're drowning in food now, but people can't imagine not having it. But I mean, that could happen.
If you have only a couple of food providers, from the growth of the food to the processing and distribution and sale of the food, and the trend that we've had continues, you got 3-4 companies that are doing all of the work to feed our country, and one of those goes down,
Yeah,
that's starvation.
that's right. And needless to say, prices go up then too.
That's right.
Terrible.
That's right. That's right.
All right, final question here, and this is kind of a, I think this might be important. Your book, in a lot of ways, resonates a lot like J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy, I think. And have you ever thought of running for office?
Oh, well, I appreciate the question. I have thought about it long enough to know that that's not for me. I got the chance to work in the public policy arena and see it up close, and I saw some good people working in government. I saw some not so good people, and it's a brutal process. And I
But
think that we
you were a speechwriter for a while, right?
was, yeah. I was speechwriter and a media strategist for a while on Capitol Hill. And I think we need good people running for office. It's one of the things we need desperately. We also need people out there speaking independently on these issues. And that's why I do that. I try to give nonpartisan analysis, independent analysis on these issues. And I think that's important too. And yeah, I got up close enough to that to know that it wasn't anything I wanted further part of. But I'm glad when good people do decide to run. And I hope that they do. And, it takes all kinds of kinds to keep the conversation going.
Well, it does, Brian. But the problem is, it's like, unfortunately, it seems like anybody of any real accomplishment doesn't want to do it because it's just incredibly ridiculously messy.
Yeah.
So I certainly don't blame you at all. I don't. But yeah, well, let's put your book we'll put your book on our blog too. A link to Amazon right there.
Yeah.
Land Rich, Cash Poor: My Family's Hope and the Untold Story of the Disappearing American Farmer. Brian Reisinger, I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Anybody who wants to find the book can find it, as you said, on Amazon, anywhere else we have books online and bookstores nationwide. And our paperback is coming out in September.
Oh,
So
good.
anybody who wants to pre-order paperback instead of hardcover is able to do that too.
And we'll put
Oh, go ahead.
you have a website at brianreisinger.com too. We'll
That's
put
right.
a link up to that too. People
That's
have maybe a little hard time spelling your name. So
anybody who cares about these issues, just whatever they're doing to spread the word. I can't say how much I appreciate it.
thank you, Brian. I appreciate it too. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
It's Brian Reisinger. He's the author of Land Rich and Cash Poor. We'll have the link to his book up on our blog, well, tomorrow, because I'm going to fix the blog tomorrow because we don't have a show because I accidentally screwed the schedule up. So good time to use time though to do something productive. So this is part 2 of our program. I call it the Gymcast. I'm going to talk about a couple things now you probably don't hear much about in the media, in the regular media. First is an observation of mine. It has nothing to do with anything I read, anything. I'm watching the Today Show this morning. I'm basically obsessed with live TV because that's kind of what I do. So it's the third hour, and Dylan Dwyer's there, and of course I'm sexually obsessed with her, of course, and because I'm an old pervert, you know that, and I'm there talking to somebody I don't even know who, and that's actually the point. Aren't there too many celebrities now? I mean, there's celebrities everywhere, and they're supposedly celebrities, and I've never heard of them. Now, granted, I'm not that in touch with pop culture, the popular culture, like I was 20 years ago. Say, I mean, I was at one time. I was extremely in touch with it. Now I don't. I know I'm not much. I mean, most compared to most of the people my age, I am. I know that I go to dinner parties and occasions, and people, all the old fogies are always asking me what's going on, and generally I know, but I'm still not really in touch with this. I mean, there's like, for example, I can't remember the name of the actor in the new who plays Superman in the new movie. Never heard of him. I can't remember his name, but it doesn't matter. I've seen it, and I realize I don't know who that person is. So I'm watching the Today Show today, and they're talking to somebody, and I don't know who this person is, and I'm starting to wonder if anybody does. I mean, we are manufacturing celebrities now because there's more of a demand for celebrities than there is a supply. That's actually because there's so many media outlets doing so much stuff. I mean, I don't have to tell you, any night on Rumble, there's 300 shows just like this one. So that's why I appreciate you watching. I really do. Uh, but yeah, so and these people all need somebody to talk to, and yeah. So if you don't have a celebrity, maybe you just invent one. I don't know. I have no idea. I just don't know what's going on, and it doesn't. I don't know if it's a bad thing, but it doesn't seem like a good thing either. And not to mention, there's another thing too. All these celebrities are generally younger because everyone in the traditional media is trying to attract young people because they don't watch TV worth crap, and they don't. And seriously, why would you want to? Somebody, my cousin pointed this out to me. Why would you watch like Chicago Fire on NBC or where the hell it is when you can watch 3 or 4 really entertaining 1 minute videos on TikTok and save yourself 45 minutes? And he's right. I can't argue with that. And I don't look at I'm not much of a TikTok fan, although I'm on there. We've been threatening to put this show on there. We're still kind of trying. But I'm on YouTube regularly, and I really look at the shorts on YouTube all the time. And actually, the thing I like about YouTube is it mixes both. You have your shorts and you have your horizontal long form videos, both, because I like to watch both of them. And why watch Chicago Fire? And so speaking of that, and excuse me, I have I left this was on the outline, but it was for later, but I'm going to bring it up right now about the fact that I don't have to tell you Stephen Colbert, bit the dust. And that's actually a really interesting story. So, because the thing is, I don't think anybody in the media is really covering this the way it should be covered. So he's been doing that job on the Late Show on CBS for 11 years. Excuse me. This has gotten lost to time, but people forget that the first year he started, he was failing to the point where they almost fired him. So they hired Chris Lick as his. I'm burping. It's terrible. Don't burp into the microphone. They hired Chris Licht as his executive producer because Chris was in charge of setting up Morning Joe and then also the CBS Morning Show, which was at that time was Charlie Rose, Norah O'Donnell, Gail King, and the chemistry was fantastic. Yeah, I understand that Charlie Rose, liked to open his robe to a bunch of the interns. I understand that, but besides that, the chemistry was really terrific on that program. The ratings it's basically the first time they had good ratings in the morning in 20 years. And Morning Joe, it's a joke now, and that's another. I've discussed that in the past about the fact that show's completely gone downhill when the two of them decided to get married. And I won't go on that about because I want to get to my point here. I'm not going to go on about that. But anyway, Chris Lake had a really good track record. So Colbert's failing. His ratings are bad. The show is not good. Everybody knows it. And Lick comes on and says, "Well, Stephen, what do you want to do?" And Stephen says, "Well, I really like to do political commentary." Because you remember, he came from the Colbert Report on Comedy Central, where he played basically a parody of Bill O'Reilly, right? And he was extremely good at it. It was a very, very entertaining show. And this is actually my point here. So he Letterman quits the Late Show, and everybody says, "We gotta hire Colbert. You gotta hire Colbert. You gotta hire Colbert." And it's never occurred. And I'm sitting back, I'm watching this, and I'm thinking, I'm starting to think I'm really not that stupid. I'm starting to think, well, this guy, Stephen Colbert, has never appeared on television out of character in his entire career. He's never been on television as himself. And it's a completely different art than playing a character or even a non-scripted one. And they're completely different things, which is the reason so many people try to in the entertainment business, try to host talk shows and fail at it. I cannot tell. Now I've done some acting. I've little parts in little movies. I've done it, enough to know what it's about. Uh, it's apples and oranges. And that's it's also comedy doesn't mean you can host a talk show successfully either. Just because you're a good stand-up comedian doesn't mean you can do it. Case in point, Greg Gutfeld's never done any stand-up ever. I mean, now he goes on these tours where he basically sits in a chair and pontificates, and people pay to see it, and that's fine. But he's never done any actual stand-up comedy, But he learned the job, and he's hosting the show to very great success. So anyway, my point is, so Colbert comes on and he hosted this Colbert Report, and everybody says, "Oh, you got to hire him, you got to hire him, you got to hire him," and they hire him. And I'm sitting back and thinking he's never played himself on TV. He doesn't know how to do it. And sure enough, he didn't know how to do it. So he almost got fired. And so they bring in Chris Lick to fine tune this thing. Basically, it's a Hail Mary pass. And Chris asks Stephen, "What do you want to do?" And Stephen says, "Well, I really like doing political commentary." And says, "Well, then let's do that." So that is when the show shifted to being basically left-wing propaganda, basically, because that's what Stephen felt comfortable doing. He's now basically been doing the Colbert Report out of character. It's the same show, except he's no longer doing it in character. And that's basically he was comfortable enough with that to make it work. And so they captured half of the public, and and it was the theory was at the time that capturing half of the public well is better than trying to capture the whole public half-ass. Now, talk radio in the United States basically runs on that theory, because I don't know if you know this, there's virtually no liberal talk radio in America. I mean, there's a couple hosts that are well known. Stephanie Miller, Tom, what's his name? I can't remember now. But there's basically, it doesn't work. It's not that people don't try it. No one's interested. So the conservatives capture that audience. So yeah, they're only preaching to half the choir, but that choir is very fervent, and that was the theory they were going on the Late Show, that we can get this to work. And for a while, it worked. It worked for a while. And then Donald Trump won, blew everything up. Then they started to realize, oh my God. And this really bears repeating. And that is, as of summer of last year, there are now more registered Republicans in America than registered Democrats for the first time ever. And so that switch happened. And lo and behold, now he's preaching to the minority. So, not to mention the fact the show wasn't very funny. There's that too. I mean, I'm not the only person who said that. He was going on, and the guests he's had on, he has politicians are like, so I want to point something out to you here. I don't have sitting politicians on the show. We don't ask. I don't want them. I don't. They'll basically say anything they need to say to get elected. It doesn't matter whether they're Republicans or Democrats. Doesn't matter. I don't want to talk to them. They're boring. Now, this we just had on BRIAN REISINGER, I personally didn't think that was boring. I learned something about farming in America. I hope you did too. Leslie Corbry's coming on in a few minutes. She's going to talk about writing. She wrote a book of poetry about, her book. Now she's quite partisan, and her books are too. But she wrote a book of poetry on slamming progressive values. Like, Jesus Christ. I mean, I got to give her, that takes balls. And I told her that too. So you'll hear that in a minute, But the thing is, this didn't really work. Now, the reason I brought all of this up is because, as I predicted a few weeks ago, since the whole thing with Colbert started, since he got fired, Fallon's job is apparently safe. The president of NBC, and I don't know her name, I can't remember her name, but apparently she's a big fan of Fallon. And also, the other thing is, that's the Tonight Show franchise. Was the very first, not only late night talk show, it was basically the very first talk show on national TV. And they're not going to let that die. They aren't. And also, the other thing is, he was by far the least partisan of the four of them. Well, five, if you go back to Corden. But they did not replace Corden. Did you notice that? They put on a game show with what's her name? Tomlinson. And she does a good job, but I'm not interested in watching a game show in the middle of the night. I'm not. And that's failing too. They've canceled that. So of the four people that are left, Fallon's by far the least partisan of all of them. And for all the crap he got about rustling up Donald Trump's hair, it looks like he's going to win. Uh, he will, and I didn't know this too. This is really interesting. I didn't know this. Of all those guys in late night, Fallon has by far the highest social network profile. He's outpacing on YouTube clips from the Tonight Show outpace Colbert's show like 3-1. I mean, it's really not. It's not even close. It's not even close at all. So I think that's kind of interesting too. Is for all the crap he got for being nonpartisan, he's going to win because he's nonpartisan. And I think there's a very good possibility that the Tonight Show, when all is said and done, this might be like 3 or 5 years from now, it will be the only one of these shows left. And because I don't think they will ever cancel it ever. I don't, just because of the legacy. You have to understand the Tonight Show was started as a nighttime companion to the Today Show, and the Today Show will never go away either. That's partly for that reason. I mean, these shows are, the Tonight Show started in 1955. So it's like 70 years old. So anyway, there's that. And then the other thing, and let's segue to AI then. Former chief business officer of Google X, which is the R&D arm of Google, says that not only is AI going to take a bunch of jobs, sooner or later will even replace company CEOs. Guy's name is Mo Gaudat. And he thinks it's actually going to replace the president of companies. The head of it will actually be running companies. I don't know if that's true, but it just gives you an idea of what people think about how the severity of all this. And speaking of the Tonight Show and entertainment, Billy Ray, he's a screenwriter. He wrote The Hunger Games of all things and several other high profile movies. He is really he thinks AI is an existential threat to Hollywood, and it is. He's right. It's already being used, and he acknowledges that. He thinks that in the last Writers Guild strike, they gave up too much regarding AI contribution to screenwriting, because right now it's already being used like to gussy up drafts of screenplays and come up with first drafts, and also it hasn't really replaced screenwriters yet. But I do have to tell you, and this is not necessarily replacing screenwriters, but probably in the next 5 years or so, we're going to have the first feature length movie that's going to be generated by one single person. Right now, you can already type scripts, and I can't remember the name. There's several different AIs that do this, and two in particular, where you can put scripts in and automatically generate a movie scene. The problem is right now those scenes can only be about 1 minute of length, but somebody will sooner or later string all these together. And also the other thing is the AI right now doesn't have any memory of anything he previously did on these screenplays either. So at some point, the AI will improve, and somebody will shoot an entire feature-length movie just by typing it in, which will be really interesting. It'll kind of be like the great American novel of the 21st century, huh? It's like for the longest time, a lot of people who write novels say they do it because they can do it alone. They don't want to deal with film executives and all that crap, so they don't bother to actually write screenplays. They write novels, and hopefully maybe somebody will turn it into a screenplay. But now you'd be able to actually take your screenplay and directly turn it into a movie without any other assistance or any other human being involved. Now Billy Ray says this, and he says, he acknowledges this too. He says the problem with this is that sooner or later all these movies will kind of feel the same, and he's right, they will. Sooner or later people will start to get savvy enough so that they can notice what's AI generated, and that hasn't happened yet. I'm pretty good at catching AI photographs and videos because I've been doing this a long time. But recently I've been fooled a few times, and I'm sure it'll get better and better. So the world's going to hell. And with that, let's bring on Leslie Corbly, attorney and anti-feminist from Utah. Here we go, everybody. Joining us from her office in Utah, Leslie Corbly. She's the author of, oh, Jesus Christ, Jim. What are you going to, I'm going to put it on the screen right now.
You're okay. Oh, no, it's Progressive Prejudice.
What was it? What was that, Leslie? What?
Hold on. It's Progressive Prejudice. Here, do you have the Amazon link?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We'll put that up in our blog. I mean, this is video, so obviously.
Oh, no. I meant the book is different. The one I was promoting now.
Oh, yeah. I have that too. I did not put that on the screen, but I thought
that's the one that's coming out in October. So
yeah,
it's a little more relevant if that works.
That's right. Although I have questions about this too. So the thing is,
let's do both. I love that.
We're gonna do both. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Your publicist did not tell me about the upcoming book, but I found it anyway.
Oh, good.
So Silent Suffering is a book of poetry that's about basically postmodern progressivism. And how in God's name did you wrap your mind around writing about this in poetry? That's what I want to know. How did you come up with this?
I got bored. I mean, this was before I had a child, obviously.
Well, that's as good a reason as any. That's right.
And I've always been frustrated by this idea that progressives have sort of dominated the cultural landscape for so long, particularly in relation to the arts. Anything artistic or emotional or that touches on the human spirit and soul has sort of almost been abandoned by the conservative or right side of the aisle. And that was very frustrating to me, as I think there's actually a lot of pain that's produced by progressive beliefs and progressive culture. And so one of the things I was trying to do with the poetic expression was blend both the heart and the mind, right? So it's a very philosophical set of poems. It's not prose. It's actually written, it blends classical style, but doesn't stick exclusively to classical poetic styles. So it uses rhyme and meter, for example, in ways that I don't think are very common of modern poetry. And I thought that would be an interesting way to express different ideas that are conservative in orientation, that challenge progressive worldviews and ideals.
Well, Leslie, a whole bunch of stuff is generated. Great works have been generated by boredom. So I think you're somebody who gets bored pretty easy, huh?
Well, I suppose so. I joke. I'm like, this certainly was pre-child. I had my child last August, and the poetry book came out sometime in 2020. But before that, maybe 5-6 months before he was born. And so I was writing it the year prior to that. It was a lot of fun. I would go to different open mics. I almost got kicked out of a bar for reading a pro-life poem. So that was fun.
Is that really true? You did?
Well, I was told never to do that again. I read a
Oh my God! It
was very funny. I read a poem. It's in the poetry collection called "Compassion or Cruelty." That's the title of it, and it was basically about this. I walked the listener through a story of a fictitious girl who finds out she was only born because an abortion clinic closed after Dobbs, and sort of walked the listener through her going through school and learning all these progressive ideas about how she should be dead. And, like actually her existence is this existential error. If the Supreme Court had ruled correctly, she'd be dead. And so it walks the listener through like the silent shame that comes with that. And that was not taken well. But it was kind of pointing out the hypocrisy. Again, like you say you're compassionate, but you don't look at the ways in which your worldview can look cruel to someone else.
Right.
And that's, again, like one of the overarching things why I titled the second book.
Leslie, this didn't happen with a Utah bar, did it?
It was in a brewery in Utah.
Really? In Utah?
Well, yeah, but you think Salt Lake City is actually like a very progressive city.
I've heard
it's a very
that.
Mormon state. It's a very
I've never been there, right?
State.
Right.
You go to certain pockets of Salt Lake City, and it can be quite progressive. And it was not taken well. It's funny. I did always enjoy looking at everyone's face because people's faces start to get really shocked. They're like, "Oh my God, you're not supposed to say that in public."
Well, also in the form of poetry too. It's like you don't expect that.
No.
I've read some of your commentaries and some of your articles and stuff. I mean, yeah, it's all fun and good, but people don't expect to hear this stuff in poetry.
progressives go to an open mic, they assume that everyone's also progressive. And that's one of the things I thought was, I'm not going to pretend it was kind of funny for me. You know, people think, oh, this woman's going to come up and read a poem. So they think it's going to be sort of, you know,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
there's an image that comes into
Oh
mind.
yeah, there is for
See
sure.
that.
Absolutely.
That was not what they were expecting.
Have you you know, I've never seen a survey on this. I keep talking about this all the time. I'd like to see a survey how many conservatives are former liberals. Did you come out of the womb conservative, or did you have a transformation?
I was definitely never a liberal. Well, I was never drawn to liberalism, and that's where the book Progressive Prejudice is actually very relevant, is that that's a blend of autobiography and cultural commentary. And the reason for that is that one of the first words I actually learned was something my mom called me. She would say all the time, Leslie is half aborted. And so I started thinking about abortion and right and wrong, like death, suicide, very early in life. So I was thinking about these very existential topics. And frankly, I was not at all impressed with the progressive orientation towards children. This idea that abortion is purely a matter that relates only to either the mother or the dead baby, I thought was really offensive, because every child comes from a mother. So if the idea is that a mother has an inherent right to kill her child in utero, what you're really telling children is that their existence is subservient to their mother's desire, and that they don't have any inherent worth unless it's given to them by their mother.
Yeah.
I thought that was actually very offensive and incredibly cruel. And so I thought the whole progressive mind, as it relates to speaking about tolerance, love, and compassion, I saw really the opposite. And I really thought that the progressive, like, soul was hypocritical, and so I was very jaded to that very, very young age, and I was not at all impressed with the progressive calls for compassion and love. I simply thought that it was a very hypocritical worldview.
Did having your own child change or refine any of your political belief systems at all?
I think it definitely refined. I think for sure it definitely strengthened my pro-life views. But I think it refined my views on how women should speak of children. I found it very offensive, for example, that I was often sort of goaded into conversations while pregnant and even postpartum that would have maybe made my son be perceived as a burden. And I found that to be very disgusting. I think the idea of making children feel as if they are burdensome to their mothers is, I don't like that discourse. Again, I understand pregnancy and childbirth is challenging, and it's challenging for different people in different ways. And that should absolutely be discussed. But I think the discourse has definitely shifted more in the direction of women feeling quite comfortable saying things that would be very disparaging if they were spoken of in any other interpersonal context.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I agree.
I find it disgusting, and I don't like it.
Have you found that not you, or I've noticed a lot of people I know, motherhood can drastically change their personalities. I'll give you an example. We used to call my wife's older sister, we would refer to her as the ice queen, because she wasn't exactly a very touchy-feely person, but she had her kid, man, and that completely changed. It's like, and I've noticed with a lot of other people. Did you have out of politics, did you have any or did you notice any changes regarding having children?
I wouldn't say necessarily a personality change. I'm much more open. I'm much more direct. That's what I think interesting. There was definitely much more of a. I feel as though almost a lot of feelings I had from maternal abuse were really, I don't want to say cured. That's not really the right word. They were really clarified having a child, right? The knowledge that what was good, it was very symbiotic for me. So this idea that what's good for the mother is good for the child, and what's good for the child is good for the mother, it made me much less tolerant for people treating me poorly.
Yeah.
That just sort of went away. It was like, well, that's not good for my child, so we're not doing that anymore.
Right. You've described yourself in some of your promotional materials as an anti-feminist. So, yeah, you did on your website. It's on the front page. So before I ask you what an anti-feminist is, I want to know what your definition of a feminist is.
Well, the reason I'm anti-feminist, those are great questions and they go right together. The reason I would call myself...
I'm really good, by the way.
The reason I call myself an anti-feminist is that the modern version of feminism, it essentially, one of its core tenets, it's blasphemy in feminist circles to say that a child has a right to life. And I think, again, that's horrible in my view. I have nothing to do with worldviews that believe that some individuals have rights over other individuals. So the idea that some human beings, women, this subset of human beings have a sex-based right to determine who comes into the world and who doesn't come into the world because they are women. I think that there's no sex-based rights to violence like that. That's absurd. I don't think that women have some inherent right to determine who lives and dies. That's frankly what used to be considered a God-given authority or a God-like authority.
Yeah.
I don't think women or any other subgroup of people have any right to exercise that. Women obviously bear more of an emotional and physical cost to childbirth. That's true. But it takes two to tango. And the reality is I don't think men should be told you get to bond with the child, but only on the terms of the woman, right?
Yeah.
I don't agree with that. And I think that that's fundamentally disordered. I think it is sexist, frankly, to view yourself because you have certain genitalia or as being more capable of deciding who lives and dies, you know, as if you're some kind of a god in that sense. Like you're not, you don't see all outcomes. And so I'm fundamentally against that. And I think that that's I don't believe in sex-based violence. And that's, I think, really what the feminist movement of the 21st century hedges itself on. I mean, sure, there are some, you know, there's a few feminists who would disagree with that and would dissent and say they're pro-life and feminist, but that's most certainly in the minority. And so that's my fundamental reason for being anti-feminist.
But I will take that a step further, especially in regarding recent events. I'm not the only person that's noticed that, talking about making judgments about other people, that there's a large majority of the people on the extreme left right now that are forming judgments and cancel culture and all this stuff. I mean, I'm not the only person that knows this. There's a lot of them are women, and they're educated women. So seriously, first of all, do you agree with that? And secondly, if so, why is that?
Well, sure. I think that you're absolutely right. Cancel culture is rampant on the left. The left makes all kind of judgments about individuals that they deem to be less worthy. I mean, I think the fundamental reason for it is that they've been able to do this for 50 plus years. I mean, you know, the left is controlled by education.
You're saying ergo it's just a matter of control and nothing else.
More or less, yes. And because people who are victimized by progressive ideology don't tend to speak out. I would say I'm in the tiny minority of people who would be willing to speak out in this way. Children who are harmed by their mothers, frankly, have an enormous mountain to climb in order to even understand they were abused. The reason being that women are actually they're the first authority figures for children. I mean, they are, right? They're the first authority figure. They're the first person that the child bonds with. You know, so for children to separate from their mothers and understand that they were harmed by the woman that brought them into existence, that's psychologically disturbing. Most people don't even want to think about it. And so, you know, children face a lot of barriers to entry to even understanding they were abused by their mothers. And that's true both because maternal abuse is extremely taboo, it's stigmatized, and also because it's less like female forms of violence are less likely to be overt. There's less likely to be a bunch of bruises all over your body. You know, the psychological abuse that a lot of maternal abuse victims face could have been started when children are very little and have almost no awareness of what's happening to them. So, you know, I think that's the type of harm that is more progressive in its structure, right? They talk about tolerance, loving, kindness, things like that. But the ways in which progressive ideologies can cause people harm is just not really talked about. And people who are harmed by it, I think, often don't understand they were harmed by those ideologies. And so they speak out.
You're going to have to excuse me. This is kind of a personal question, but your comments just begged me to ask. And that is, did you have an unhappy childhood?
Yes, I would say so. I read a lot and I enjoyed reading a lot. And I love that about my childhood, but it was very, very isolating, very lonely.
Were you one of those people that actually channeled your loneliness into reading? You know, it's like as a, you know.
Yes. I was reading Peter Singer by the time I was 12, probably. I mean, I read all the time. But I was homeschooled, so that kind of thing was allowed. And I was homeschooled before it was popular, you know.
Yeah, right.
So it wasn't really popular. My mom was very isolationist, so we didn't do groups or anything like that. But she was mathematical. She was a very good teacher. So she taught, I think, advanced calculus at the collegiate level before she had children. So she was very good at the math-oriented fields of study, and anything in the logic realm was very well taught.
Okay, let's go back to my original question. So then what's an anti-feminist?
Well, in my view, an anti-feminist is someone who's pro-life.
I'm sorry, what was that? I didn't catch it.
Anti-feminist would be someone who's pro-life, someone who believes children and women have equal value. I don't believe that progressives think children have equal value to women. I don't think you can tell a child that their mother had the right to kill them and then tell that child, well, you have equal worth to your mother. That's just not, you know, that's just inherently confusing and disorienting because it's incoherent. And so I think that progressives don't believe children have equal value to women, and I think that that's ridiculous.
Yeah. So in your upcoming book here, which we weren't supposed to talk about, but we're going to talk about, called Progressive Prejudice, and it's coming out on October 21st. I'm sorry, your publicist told me to plug the other one.
That's okay, we can do both. That's fine.
Yeah, my apologies. So you said here that the devouring mother is an archetype of female predation. Can you explain that for people that are stupid as like me?
Sure. So, there's all kinds of archetypes right now out of toxic masculinity and things that men can do poorly. But there's not a lot of talk about what happens when femininity becomes perverted. And so the devouring mother is sort of, think of it as archetype of like toxic femininity. And so what it is rather than nurturing or caretaking and appropriate.
I have to stop you for a second. I'm so glad you brought that term up because I've been using it, toxic femininity. I'm so tired of hearing about toxic masculinity. It's nice to hear about somebody talk about toxic femininity. Thank you. Go on.
For sure. So basically the idea is that it's a perversion of caretaking. So rather than taking care of a child, the mother actually controls or infantilizes the child or enmeshes herself with the child in an inappropriate manner. So a really crystal clear example of this, and obviously there's others, is Gypsy Rose Blanchard. I'm not sure if your listeners are familiar with her, but she ended up being involved in a plot to kill her mother. Her mother had invented a bunch of fictitious diseases for this child and had her undergo numerous surgical procedures that were unnecessary, causing great harm. And that's the disorder that her mother had was what's called Munchausen by proxy, which is mother, gains like they're controlling their child through care, right? Look at me, I'm taking care of the child, but they're actually harming the child.
Right.
And that's essentially, I think, what toxic femininity is. It's a perversion of nurture and caretaking. So rather than actually engaging in caretaking that helps and is caretaking, it's instead control, infantilization, and something that actually harms the subject of care.
I'm going to run a bullshit theory by you. The fact that I have thought for the longest time that first of all, that progressivism is basically feminist based, and the problem with it is that a lot of women try to take what they learn in child rearing, even if it's positive, even the positive stuff, and try to apply it to the rest of running society. And the only place it works is when you're raising children. It has no application anywhere else, but nobody sees that. What do you think of that theory?
I think that's true. I think there's elements of truth to it for sure. Progressivism, wouldn't really exist with the power it does without the dominance of progressivism among women. And that's just reality. And I also think that there's a lot of disempowerment. There's a lot of, I think, distorted views of women on the progressive side of the aisle. So one of the things I mentioned in the book is that I don't think progressives really have a way of understanding femininity as a form of power. I think they only understand the word woman as victim. That to be a woman is to be a victim, I think, in their eyes. And so I think one of the reasons that child rearing, caretaking, things that actually have an enormous amount of power socially and always have. Again, the power imbalance between a mother and a child is extreme. I mean, the ways in which a mother can control and frankly program a child is something that a dad can't really replicate. The child is much more automatically attuned to the mother.
Leslie, I never thought about that before, but that's a corollary in my theory. I never really thought about that. You're right.
They have an enormous amount of authority over children when they're really little. I mean, think of what the ways in which you're treated as a child when you're really little can have profound impact on how that child lives their life. If you're in a healthy, happy environment, if you have a good relationship with your mother versus if your mother is yelling at an infant, the infant will never remember that, but they will. And so there's this area of power that women have that we don't talk about that way, because we talk about having children for women in progressive circles as being disempowering, primarily, right? There's a lot of focus on the negativities of childbirth, and that's what props up this whole pro-choice dogma, right? Is that it should be a woman's right to choose, but there's actually no discussion of how the children have no right to choose, and that's including living children. And the fact that women have an enormous, just incredible amount. Mothers have so much power over their children. It's unbelievable. No tyrant exercises that much power over their subjects.
They were floating in Pennsylvania about basically post-birth abortion was absolutely sickening.
It's no surprise though, because I mean, really, the way Democrats and progressives tend to think is that victim categories don't do anything wrong, right? So this is one of the reasons you can't ever offend a victim category. I think it's also one of the reasons that trans men are considered victims, because they sort of claimed womanhood, and by claiming womanhood, they get to be a victim,
Right.
That's
Right.
part of it. And so the idea is that mothers would never, I mean, again, the whole idea is that the mother would never intentionally harm the child. It doesn't matter if the mother is saying, hey, can someone like, I mean, if someone looks at what a partial birth abortion is, for example, that's pretty gruesome stuff
Yeah.
going on there,
It is.
right? But I think progressives struggle to see that, because in their eyes, it's just, well, that's what mother knows best, I think, is really kind of how they view that. They don't really have or hold any compassion for the child harmed, nor do they hold compassion for living children that may grow up under mothers who say horrible things like, I wish I killed you. I mean, they don't have compassion in that way, because they don't direct any of their compassion to the child.
And Leslie, tell me, how did we as a society get to the point where we bought the idea that because you might think you're a woman, you're actually a woman? I don't understand this. How did we get there? What,
Well, there's certainly always been disorders surrounding these, sexuality. So I don't think that's uncommon. I think it's a pairing of the disorders with the ability to enact them. I mean, think about what 100 years ago you couldn't have had gender reassignment surgery. That's a technological advancement.
No.
So I think that technology has caught up, and now it's allowing, and progressives don't have a like canon to rely on, right? So they're not referencing morality through something objective, like someone who's a Muslim will look to the Quran, a Christian will look to the Bible, a Mormon will look to the Book of Mormon, or whatever their surrounding texts are. They don't have that, right? And so they kind of just constantly update their morality through the priesthood of professors, essentially.
Yeah.
So they're constantly looking to this evolving moral landscape, and I think that makes them really susceptible to saying, well, why can't someone do that? It's technically possible now. There's the technology exists to allow you to enact that, or at least act it out in a way you couldn't have before. So kind of what's the problem? No harm, no foul. And I think again that comes down to a lot of examining in the progressive mind of why they believe what they believe.
Can you tell us just briefly then, if we missed anything here, what the rest of your book for Progressive Prejudice is going to be about?
Sure, absolutely. So there's a lot of themes in there, but the core of it is that it challenges the progressive worldview itself, and it places myself as the author. Like I said, I use my own story of how I sort of came to my worldview formation as a way to critique progressive ideals, because at every turn, again, I've been, I guess you could say I came out of the womb conservative in some ways. I would say I came out of the womb anti-progressive. I was just never impressed by the ideology. I never found it compelling. I didn't find it satisfying in any emotional or real way. And so the commentary stems directly from the experiences I had. And I think my hope is that it goes to give examples and blueprints for how progressives do leave plenty of people at the margins of society. We just don't see them or talk about them, because we look at the world through a progressive lens, because that's how culture is.
We're basically forced to. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Right.
They control the terms of the debate, and they sort of put blinders on for the people they harm, because in their viewpoint, they're tolerant and they're loving, and they're the good guys that are fighting against the authoritarians. I don't think see or self-reflect on their own capacity for evil.
Although I do find it kind of fascinating, they're also pretty good at eating their own too. They are. No, it's not. They just don't hate conservatives; they hate liberals too.
Anyone who's not pure enough, that's for sure.
Leslie, you know something? You know what I've learned in the last 25 minutes? You have an enormous number of ideas in your head.
Thank you.
So if you don't mind, in October, just before your book comes out, I'd like to have you on again.
Oh, I'd love to do that.
That's true. That's fantastic. I've enjoyed this immensely. You're a very, very knowledgeable woman. I'm still absolutely amazed that you wrote a book on poetry. It's like, God, stick it to him, girlfriend. It's like, that's fantastic.
Well, thank you so much.
So we're gonna put we'll put links on our blog to both of these books, but your but progressive. I'm sorry. What is progressive? What?
Prejudice, because they are capable of prejudice.
Yes, yes, is not coming out till October 21st.
Yes.
So, but you can pre-order on Amazon.
Absolutely, please do.
I bet you'd appreciate that, wouldn't you?
I would love that.
Yeah,
and I mean, for what it's worth, I think it's an interesting book. I think people will find it fun, and well, maybe not fun. I think they'll find it maybe intellectually stimulating. I don't know.
But you're fun in your own way.
I remembered the first 3 chapter titles. I was like, I don't know if that's fun.
Well, yeah, just because you wrote a book doesn't mean you can remember it all. So it's fine. It's okay. Leslie, we're going to have you back. I've enjoyed this immensely. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jim.
You take care.
Mhm.
That's Leslie Corbly, a very, very charming woman. And yeah, she has an enormous number of ideas in her head. It's like, the great thing, it's good when you have a talk show if you have people who like to talk. And tonight, both her and Brian, we didn't have any problem with that at all, did we? I have to say, we usually don't have any problems with that. It's pretty cool. I guess some of the people we have on here it's one of the great joys of doing this. We have talked to a lot of really, really interesting people. Just so when you start to get cynical about humanity, it's nice to hear people who actually have an idea in their head. All right, we're done for tonight, folks. Tomorrow night we're taking the night off. Like I said, I screwed up the schedule, so we're going to run a rerun. We're going to run Rachel Ehrenfeld from last Tuesday night. This is really fascinating. So I can't remember the name of her organization. It's basically a pro Israel organization, but she has some really interesting ideas too. This was a fascinating discussion. So I hope you tune in for that. So Thursday, we're going to do a live show, and we're having on, I got to look, entrepreneur J.C. Shepard. He's the founder of the Wimkin social network, among other things. He's started numerous companies. That's one thing he's done. And we're going to be talking to syndicated radio talk show host John Gordon, who runs a show called The Truth with John Gordon, syndicated radio nationwide. So once again, 2 more guests, and I'm looking forward to that too. I want to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I like doing this. I want to keep on doing it. So please keep on watching. And I'm very, very remiss at doing this. But yeah, if you're on Rumble or YouTube, follow us. I'd appreciate that a lot. Good night, Uncle Donnie, wherever you are, and good night to you, wherever you may be. We'll see you on Thursday night, everybody. Take care. Have a nice evening.